Parents, if you've ever experienced bedtime battles with the kids, I'm going to let you into a little secret. I'm Abby, a mother of 2, and I had these battles myself. Endless excuses, delay tactics, and many tears and tantrums. But I've created a solution. The perfect kids podcast that makes bedtime a dream. It's called Koala Moon, and it's hosted by me, Abby. With over 300 episodes, packed with original stories and sleep meditations, Koala Moon makes bedtimes easy and enjoyable. Episodes start out engaging and really rather magical, but as they progress, they gently slow to a calm and relaxing pace to have your little ones out like a light. Since launching in 2022, Koala Moon has helped with over 20 million nights' sleep and received over 6,000 5-star reviews. Win back your evenings. Listen to Koala Moon now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Tailblazers, I'm Rebecca Cunningham, and this is Girl Tales, a kids podcast packed with girl power and stories where every child's voice matters. Before we get started, I'd like to send a very special shout out to Reed in Vilas, North Carolina. Reed, thank you so much for listening to Girl Tales. I hope you love this story. Grownups, Girl Tales is brought to you by families like yours. If you would like to hear your child's name at the top of our next episode, or if you would like me to wish them a happy birthday, head to patreon.com/girltales and join a team today. Now onto our episode. This is Winnie the Bear, Kanga and Roo. Enjoy! There's something I need to admit, and it's not easy for me to say, but I think it's important. When I was younger, I was not always kind to everyone I met. It's not something I'm proud of. There was one girl in particular. She was nothing but kind and generous to me. You see, she was new at school. She'd come from another state, a place I was not familiar with. Her name was Davy. She'd always share her snacks with me at lunch and include me even when I was not being very kind. One day, Grandma Nancy picked me and my sisters up from school. She saw me being unkind to Davy. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly what Davy did or said, but I know it was probably nothing at all. I was just upset, and I told her she was acting like a baby, that she needed to grow up, and that she'd never make any friends if she didn't stop being so immature. Grandma Nancy made me apologize right then and there. I did, but I felt ashamed and embarrassed. And when I looked into Davy's eyes, I felt even worse for what I had just said. I started to cry. I left the school with Grandma Nancy and my 2 sisters and climbed into Grandma Nancy's car. We buckled our seatbelts and she turned to me and said,
"I'd like to tell you a story."
I was surprised. After what I had just done, I thought she wouldn't want to talk to me. But I nodded, feeling a bit nervous, and listened.
Nobody seemed to know where they came from, but there they were in the forest, Kanga and baby Roo. When Winnie asked Rebecca Honeycomb, "How did they come here?" Rebecca Honeycomb said,
"In the usual way, if you know what I mean, Winnie."
And Winnie, who didn't know what she meant, said, "Oh." Then she nodded her head twice and said, "In the usual way." Ah, then she went to call upon her friend Piglet to see what she thought about it. And at Piglet's house she found Rabbit, so they all talked about it together.
"What I don't like about it is this. Here is us, you, Winnie, and you, Piglet, and me, Rabbit, and suddenly—"
"And Eeyore," said Winnie.
"And Eeyore, and then suddenly—"
"And Owl."
"And Owl, and then all of a sudden—"
"Oh, and Eeyore. I was forgetting her."
"Here we are, all of us. And then, suddenly, we wake up one morning and what do we find? We find a strange animal among us, an animal of whom we have never even heard before. An animal who carries her family about with her in her pocket. Suppose I carried my family about with me in my pocket. How many pockets should I want? 16,
said Piglet.
17, isn't it? And one more for a handkerchief. That's 18. 18 pockets in one suit? I haven't time,
said Rabbit. There was a long and thoughtful silence, and then Winnie, who had been frowning very hard for some minutes, said, I make it 15.
What?
said Rabbit.
15 what?
Your family.
What about them?
Winnie rubbed her nose and said that she thought Rabbit had been talking about her family.
Did I?
Yes, you said...
Never mind, Winnie. The question is, what are we to do about Kanga?
said Piglet impatiently. Oh, I see, said Winnie.
The best way would be to steal Baby Roo and hide her. And then when Kanga says, Where's Baby Roo? We say, Aha!
Aha! Of course, we could say, Aha, even if we hadn't stolen Baby Roo.
We say, Aha, so that Kanga knows that we know where Baby Roo is. Aha means we'll tell you where Baby Roo is if you promise to go away from the forest and never come back. Now, don't talk while I think.
Winnie went into a corner and tried saying, Aha, in that sort of voice. Sometimes it seemed to her that it did mean what Rabbit said, and sometimes it seemed to her that it didn't. I suppose it's just practice. I wonder if Kanga will have to practice too, so as to understand it.
There's just one thing. I was talking to Rebecca Honeycomb, and she said that a Kanga was generally regarded as one of the fiercer animals. I am not frightened of fierce animals in the ordinary way, but it is well known that if one of the fiercer animals is deprived of its young, it becomes as fierce as two of the fiercer animals, in which case, aha is perhaps a foolish thing to say. It is hard to be brave when you're only a very small animal,
said Piglet. Rabbit took out a pencil, licked the end of it, and began to write very busily. Then she looked up and said,
It is because you are a very small animal that you will be useful in the adventure before us.
Piglet was so excited at the idea of being useful that she forgot to be frightened anymore. And when Rabbit went on to say that Kangas were only fierce during the winter months, being at other times of an affectionate disposition, she could hardly sit still. She was so eager to begin being useful at once. What about me? I suppose I shan't be useful?
Never mind, Winnie. Another time, perhaps.
Without Winnie, the adventure would be impossible,
said Rabbit solemnly as she sharpened her pencil.
Oh,
said Piglet, and tried not to look disappointed. But Winnie went into a corner of the room and said proudly to herself, Impossible without me. That sort of bear.
Now listen, all of you,
said Rabbit when she had finished writing. And Winnie and Piglet sat listening very eagerly with their mouths open. This was what Rabbit read out.
Plan to capture Baby Roo. 1. General remarks. Kanga runs faster than any of us, even me. 2. More general remarks. Kanga never takes her eye off Baby Roo except when she's safely buttoned up in her pocket. 3. Therefore, if we are to capture Baby Roo, we must get a long start because Kanga runs faster than any of us, even me. See number 1. 4. A thought. If Roo had jumped out of Kanga's pocket and Piglet had jumped in, Kanga wouldn't know the difference because Piglet is a very small animal. 5. Like Roo. 6. But Kanga would have to be looking the other way first so as not to see Piglet jumping in. 7. See 2. 8. Another thought. But if Winnie was talking to her very excitedly, she might look the other way for a moment. 9. And then I could run away with Roo. 10. Quickly. 11. And Kanga wouldn't discover the difference until afterwards.
Rabbit read the list out proudly, and for a little while after she had read it, nobody said anything. And then Piglet, who had been opening and shutting her mouth without making any noise, managed to say very huskily,
And afterwards?
How do you mean?
When Kanga does discover the difference?
Then we all say, Aha!
All 3 of us?
Yes.
Oh!
Why, what's the trouble, Piglet?
Nothing, as long as we all 3 say it. As long as we all three say it, I don't mind. But I shouldn't care to say, aha, by myself. It wouldn't sound nearly so well. By the way, you are quite sure about what you said about the winter months?
The winter months?
Yes, only being fierce in the winter months?
Oh, yes, that's all right. Well, Winnie, you see what you have to do?
No, not yet. What do I do?
Well, you just have to talk very hard to Kanga so as she doesn't notice anything.
Oh, what about?
Anything you like.
You mean like telling her a bit of poetry or something?
That's it. Splendid. Now come along.
So they all went out to look for Kanga. Kanga and Roo were spending a quiet afternoon in a sandy part of the forest. Baby Roo was practicing very small jumps in the sand and falling down mouse holes and climbing out of them. And Kanga was fidgeting about and saying,
Just one more jump, dear, and then we must go home.
And at that moment, who should come stomping up the hill but Winnie? Good afternoon, Kanga.
Good afternoon, Winnie.
Look at me jumping,
Squeaked Roo as she fell into another mouse hole. Hello, Roo, my little friend.
We were just going home. Good afternoon, Rabbit. Good afternoon, Piglet.
Rabbit and Piglet, who had now come up from the other side of the hill, said,
Good afternoon.
Hello, Roo.
And Roo asked them to look at her jumping. So they stayed and looked. And Kanga looked too. Then Rabbit winked at Winnie twice. Oh, Kanga, I don't know if you are interested in poetry at all?
Hardly at all.
Oh,
Roo, dear, just one more jump and then we must go home.
There was a short silence while Roo fell down another mouse hole.
Go on,
said Rabbit in a loud whisper behind her paw. Talking of poetry, I made up a little piece as I was walking here. It went like this. Now, let me see.
That all sounds too fancy for me. Now, Roo, dear, you'll like their piece of poetry,
said Rabbit.
You'll love it,
said Piglet.
You must listen very carefully,
so as not to miss any of it.
Well, all right,
said Kanga, but she still looked at Baby Roo.
How did it go, Winnie?
Winnie gave a little cough and began. On Monday, when the sun is hot, I wonder to myself a lot. Now, is it true or is it not, that what is which and which is what? On Tuesday, when it hails and snows, the feeling on me grows and grows, that hardly anybody knows if those are these or these are those. On Wednesday, when the sky is blue and I have nothing else to do, I sometimes wonder if it's true that who is what and what is who. On Thursday, when it starts to freeze and feather frost twinkles on the trees, how very readily one sees that these are whose, but whose are these? On Friday—
Yes, it is, isn't it?
said Kanga, not waiting to hear what happened on Friday.
Just one more jump, Roo dear, and then we really must be going.
Rabbit gave Winnie a hurrying up sort of nudge. Talking of poetry, have you ever noticed that tree right over there?
Where? Now, Roo.
Right over there, said Winnie, pointing behind Kanga's back.
No, now jump in, Roo dear, and we'll go home. You ought to look at that tree right over there. Shall I lift you in, Roo?
And she picked up Roo in her paws. I can see a bird in it from here. Or is it a fish?
You ought to see that bird from here, unless it's a fish.
It isn't a fish, it's a bird,
said Piglet.
So it is.
Is it a starling or a blackbird?
That's the whole question. Is it a blackbird or a starling?
And then at last, Kanga did turn her head to look. And the moment that her head was turned, Rabbit said in a loud voice,
In you go, Roo!
And in jumped Piglet into Kanga's pocket, and off scampered Rabbit with Roo in her paws as fast as she could.
Why, where's Rabbit?
said Kanga, turning round again.
Are you all right, Roo dear?
Piglet made a squeaky Roo noise from the bottom of Kanga's pocket. Rabbit had to go away. I think she thought of something she had to go and see about suddenly.
And Piglet?
I think Piglet thought of something at the same time, suddenly.
Well, we must be getting home. Goodbye, Winnie.
And in 3 large jumps, she was gone. Winnie looked after her as she went. I wish I could jump like that. Some can, and some can't. That's how it is. But there were moments when Piglet wished that Kanga couldn't. Often, when she had had a long walk home through the forest, she had wished that she were a bird. But now she thought in jumbly thoughts to herself at the bottom of Kanga's pocket as she bounced up and down.
This take if is shall really do flying. I never it.
And as she went up in the air, she said,
Ooh,
and as she came down, she said,
ow,
and she was saying,
ooh, ow, ooh, ow, ooh, ow, ooh, ow.
all the way to Kanga's house. Of course, as soon as Kanga unbuttoned her pocket, she saw what had happened. Just for a moment, she thought she was frightened, and then she knew she wasn't, for she felt quite sure that Rebecca Honeycomb would never let any harm happen to Roo. So she said to herself, "If they are having a joke with me, I will have a joke with them. Now then, Roo dear, bedtime," she said, as she took Piglet out of her pocket.
Aha!
Said Piglet, as best as she could after her terrifying journey. But it wasn't a very good aha, and Kanga didn't seem to understand what it meant. "Bath first," said Piglet again, looking round anxiously for the others. But the others weren't there. Rabbit was playing with Baby Roo in her own house and feeling more fond of her every minute. And Winnie, who had decided to be a Kanga, was still at the sandy place on the top of the forest, practicing jumps. "I am not at all sure that it wouldn't be a good idea to have a cold bath this evening. Would you like that, Roo dear?" Piglet, who had never really been fond of baths, shuddered a long, indignant shudder and said, in as brave a voice as she could,
Kanga, I see that the time has come to speak plainly.
she meant to say speak plainly. "Funny little Roo."
I am not Roo. I am Piglet.
"Yes, dear, yes, and imitating Piglet's voice too. So clever of you," she went on as she took a large bar of yellow soap out of the cupboard. "What will you be doing next?"
Can't you see? Haven't you got eyes? Look at me.
"I am looking, Roo dear, and you know what I told you yesterday about making faces. If you go on making faces like Piglet's, you will grow up to look like Piglet and then think how sorry you will be. Now then, into the bath, and don't let me have to speak to you about it again." Before she knew where she was, Piglet was in the bath, and Kanga was scrubbing her firmly with a large, lathery washcloth.
Ow! Let me out. I'm Piglet.
"Don't open your mouth, dear, or the soap goes in. There, what did I tell you?"
You did it on purpose.
spluttered Piglet as soon as she could speak again, and then accidentally had another mouthful of lathery washcloth. "That's right, dear, don't say anything," said Kanga, and in another minute Piglet was out of the bath and being rubbed dry with a towel. "Now you have to take your medicine, and then bed. To make you grow big and strong, dear. You don't want to grow up small and weak like Piglet, do you? Well then." At that moment there was a knock at the door. "Come in," said Kanga, and in came Rebecca Honeycomb.
Rebecca Honeycomb, Rebecca Honeycomb, tell Kanga who I am. She keeps saying I'm Roo. I'm not Roo, am I?
Rebecca Honeycomb looked at her very carefully and shook her head.
You can't be Roo, because I've just seen Roo playing in Rabbit's house.
"Well, fancy that. Fancy my making a mistake like that."
There you are. I told you so. I'm Piglet.
Rebecca Honeycomb shook her head again.
Oh, you're not Piglet. I know Piglet well, and she is a very different color.
Piglet began to say that this was because she had just had a bath, and then she thought that perhaps she shouldn't say that. And as she opened her mouth to say something else, Kanga slipped the medicine spoon in and then patted her on the back and told her that it was really quite a nice taste when you got used to it. "I knew it wasn't Piglet. I wonder who it can be."
Perhaps they're a family member of Winnie's. What about a niece or an aunt or something?
Kanga agreed that that probably was what it was, and said that they would have to call her by some name.
I shall call her Wintel. Henrietta Wintel for short.
And just when it was decided, Henrietta Wintel wriggled out of Kanga's arms and jumped to the ground. To her great joy, Rebecca Honeycomb had left the door open. Never had Henrietta Wintel Piglet run so fast as she ran then, and she didn't stop running until she had got quite close to her house. But when she was 100 yards away, she stopped running and rolled the rest of the way home so as to get her own nice comfortable color again. So Kanga and Roo stayed in the forest. And every Tuesday, Roo spent the day with her great friend Rabbit. And every Tuesday, Kanga spent the day with her great friend Winnie, teaching her to jump. And every Tuesday, Piglet spent the day with her great friend Rebecca Honeycomb. So they were all happy again.
As we pulled into the parking spot in front of my family's apartment, I thought about Winnie, Rabbit, Piglet, Kanga, and Roo. It was a silly, funny story, but even then, I knew Grandma Nancy was trying to tell me something more. Winnie and the others were scared of Kanga and Roo because they were different. But when they got to know them, they realized that being different was not a bad thing. It just made the 100-acre wood a better place. Hearing this story made me think about how I had treated Davy. She was trying so hard to be kind to me, even while I was being so unkind to her. Just like Kanga and Roo, she deserved kindness and friendship, not the way that I had treated her. The next day at school, I'd sat next to Davy at lunch. I shared my snacks with her this time, and we ended up becoming really great friends. We're friends till this day, even. And now, whenever I feel unsure about someone who seems different or new, I remember Winnie, Kanga, and Roo, and I try to be a little kinder. That was Winnie the Bear, Kanga, and Roo, a story adapted from Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. Adapted, performed, and executive produced by Rebecca Cunningham. Performed by Tessa Flannery. Produced by Chenail. Grownups, thanks for listening to Girl Tales with your Tailblazers. Before you go, here are some questions to help keep the conversation going with your child. What part of today's story did you enjoy the most, and why? Did you connect with a character in this story? Did you learn something new? How did you feel about this story? Did it remind you of something in your own life? We hope this sparks some fun and meaningful conversations. Girl Tales is a Cordelia Studios production. Grownups, you can get access to ad-free episodes of Girl Tales, as well as a range of other shows for the kids in your life by subscribing to Starglow Plus on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to hear me narrate the original stories of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, or Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, head to patreon.com/girltales and join Team Sunnybrook or above. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you loved this story, share it with a friend. Oh, and remember, I believe in you.
There's a hill and a road and a path where I know you must go. Through the sun, wind, rain, or snow. But wherever you venture, you can always come home. 'Cause I trust your heart, I trust my heart, and I trust your mind, I trust my mind, and I trust the friends, I trust the friends I know you will find o'er the hill and on the road.